All right, so this is something I've been saying I was going to do for probably 6 months or so. So I'm actually going to try and do it for you now. So this is just an introduction to a piece of software that I use called 3D Coat. When I say 3D Coat, I'm actually talking about two different pieces of software, um, which is 3D Coat itself, but also 3D Coat Textura. And the difference between the two is that 3D Coat Textura is exclusively just the paint room portion of the full 3D Coat software suite. 3D Coat itself is a huge powerhouse, equivalent to something like Blender, where it can do pretty much everything. I'm going to turn my mic down just a smidge, sorry. So, if you are interested in being able to do voxel sculpting, which in 3D Coat is something really cool, where it's a bit like ZBrush, where the actual topology of the model doesn't matter. You can just sculpt however you like and then retopo it later, and it'll just dynamically add more topology to let you do that. It does that. It also has a whole retopo room, so it's really cool. But for the purposes of this video, what we're focusing on is just the paint room portion because that is what 90% of Second Life modders are going to need to use. So if that is all you need, 3D Coat Textura will cover everything. It does also do PBR. They talk about that, but if that is your focus, you're probably better off in Substance Painter, as that is kind of the industry leader in that, and most of the assets that you can purchase in Smart Materials are going to be for Substance Painter. I use 3D Coat for PBR and baking because of, I don't know, stubbornness, masochism, and brokenness. I don't want to buy another piece of software. So, sorry. Um, the first thing I want to kind of go over is the cost of this software. It is not free. It is, however, a permanent license, which means that once you purchase it, you do own it forever. You will receive updates for a year when you purchase a license. If you would like to purchase an additional year of updates after that, for Textura, it is an additional 40 euros per year. Um, which is like 50 or $60. But it will tell you this software goes on sale every Black Friday and you can purchase updates on Black Friday. And that would be my advice, would just do it then at the discounted pricing. And it works out to about $30 or $40 a year. Not too bad. You do also have options to rent to own if you don't have the full, 119 euros up front, or I think it's $90 on sale for Black Friday, where you can make 7 payments of 21.6 euros. If you do that option, you receive updates the whole time you're doing the rent to own, and you get a year of updates after you make the final payment. So it actually is a good deal, even though it doesn't sound like it. Or you can do the monthly subscription option, and it's about $12 a month in US, and it comes with updates the whole time you're subscribed. But personally, I am a big fan of the permanent license, and that's what I have. So all that covered, what happens? You buy the software, or you do the 30-day trial, which is a full unlocked 30-day trial. You have access to every aspect of the software. After those 30 days, the software automatically switches over to what they call unlimited learning mode. Unlimited learning mode has some restrictions on export types and the number of layers that you can use, but aside from that, it is the full software and you can just kind of keep playing with it to determine if it's for you. So let's say you buy it. What do you get? So this is 3D Coat. I have the full software suite. I upgraded from 3D Coat Textura last year, but Textura looks just like this, except it will not have this drop down at the top, which allows you to switch to the other rooms. Textura is only the paint room, and that's literally what it is. It just took this part and locked it up by itself. So your welcome splash screen here has all of the options for you. I think on Textura it's a little more brief, It only has these like paint UV map mesh options. It's not going to have like import images mesh and all that, or surface sculpting, so on. So if you are making mods for Second Life, it is super duper easy. What you need is this paint UV mapped mesh option. So you just click on that. You have some models that they include if you just want to play with it and see how it works. But if you have your own models that you're wanting to paint on, you would just click this folder here and select your models. So in my case, I'm going to show you, I don't want to use any of the mesh bodies because I just don't want YouTube to be mad at me for a crease between the thighs. So let me pick something out real quick. Something I have a PSD kit for. So I can show you how that works. All right, so we have here the Anima Fox that I've just opened. Um, this looks a little overwhelming, and what this is showing you here is what is a normal map software preset for export to Second Life. If you're wanting to create normal maps inside 3D Coat, which you can do, the choice you want to make here is OpenGL. Initial subdivision, if you are painting on a low poly model and you want it to be smoother for painting, you can apply subdivision here on import. UV map type and keep UV, leave that as it is. UV set smoothing, no smoothing, keep that also as it is. You don't need to mess with most of these other options except no center snap. What that will do, if you leave it off, is the model will snap to the center of the world. And so if it's a head, it'll be down on the ground plane in the middle of the world. And if it's a body, it might be like halfway through the ground. So just turn that off and it'll load in exactly where it was in the dev kit when it was exported. Weld vertices, you want to leave that off. What that does is if two verts are in the same place, 3D Coat will automatically make them into one. You can use this as a troubleshooting option if you're having difficulty when you import a kit. Invert normals, leave that as it is. Lock normals, if you are making normal maps, you may wish to turn that on because that will lock the model's normals as they were created instead of 3D Coat recalculating new ones. Set sharp edges over UV seams can be useful if you're doing hard surface modeling, but for modding, you want to leave that as it is. Auto smoothing groups, don't turn that on either. Treat materials as separate textures. And that's why we see so many here. What it's going to do is that for every material face on the object, it's going to create a separate texture object. I typically turn this off, especially if you're working with like the SLUV, or if you have one object with a single UV map that you've done multiple materials on just for convenience, because you will then have to combine those textures back together when you're done. So I just turn that off. Typically, if you want it on, you'll know you want it on. If you don't, leave it off. Okay, so then we'll click that, and that's going to go ahead and load in our model. I apparently was just zoomed out really far, but there it is. And that is the Anima Fox head. By default, the camera will kind of stick to the last place that your mouse was near, which is nice. The model might have actually imported too small because my brush is really, really big. Really, really big. Okay. Sometimes that just happens depending on the scale that it was set to when it was exported, and you may just have to mess with that. Um, Either by doing some prep work in Blender beforehand. One thing that is very, very nice about 3D Coat versus Substance Painter, one of my favorite features, and actually the feature that got me to purchase this software in the first place, is that 3D Coat does not care about your UVs. It doesn't care about UDIM tiles. It doesn't care about mesh borders. If you want to paint from the head to the ear, it's just going to let you paint straight from the head to the ear, and it's going to do that without any problems. And you can actually see that it applies to both UV maps separately. Very, very handy. You will see, so what happens, I painted on here and there's like all this goop all over it. That was one of the very first things that I just could not find any real information on when I started. I was like, how do I turn off these materials? I don't want those. It's actually really easy. Up here at the top, you actually have these little boxes, and you can turn it to no glossiness. And then you can, this one here that says depth, you can turn that to no depth. And now, oh, oh, what just happened? Oh, I turned them all off. Not what I meant to do. There you go. You can set that to no depth. You don't want to mess with the middle one because that's opacity, and we do definitely need that. And so now it'll just paint on there nice and flat. If you forget, or maybe you've been painting in flat shader mode, which is a 2 on the keyboard, or up here, all the shading modes are right here. Um, and you paint on it and it looks bad because you left, glossiness on, right? You can actually go over here to the layers tab, right click on it, and you can say, remove glossiness or set height to 0, or you can change it here as well. So gloss opacity, metallicity opacity, and depth opacity. And you can use these controls on purpose if you're making your own normal maps and specular maps. So, all right, I mean, this is cool and all, and if I wanted to just shade this whole thing by myself, I sure could, right? Just paint on here. But I already have a PSD kit, so what do I do about that? 3D Coat has full PSD support, which means you can actually just import a PSD and it will work. And it will maintain all of the layers, so we can play with it just like we would in our 2D software. So we just click on textures, import, and what we're looking for here is layers color. If you have just a single texture you'd like to import, you would click on color or albedo map. So we click layers color. You do have to know which material it needs to apply to, which is slightly frustrating when you have models where the materials are not named. So in this case, I'm just gonna draw on the face here and hope for the best. And I believe that that was material 12. Yes. So I can import layers color on material 12. I may have too many PSD kits. I also may have not unzipped this one yet. One second. Oh, I don't have the fox one. I have the wolf one. One second. Too many things. This one's also tiny. I think all the Anima ones are like this. Yeah, it's so small. Okay. All right, so now we're going to go to, and again, I think, okay, so yeah. Oh, it's not number 15 because, okay, here's what we can do. Down here, yours may be slightly laid out differently. You can access all of these panes and customize them to your like. You can move them around, add new ones and everything, and those are all located up here in Windows panels. So you can just kind of go through and find what you need to add. And then there's even like custom sliders that you can add, and you can change the UI color, which is what I have done here. Um, but we're going to go to surface materials, and this will list all of them for you. You can rename them from here to make your life easier, and you can toggle them on and off so you don't have to guess. And if you have parts that you want to hide while you're painting, you can do that. It's a little jerky because the model's so small and I'm using my tablet. If you're using a mouse, it's a little smoother, or if the model is the correct size, the camera controls are a lot finer. So we're gonna turn off the cheek fluff here. There we go. Okay, so the head, there we go. Okay. Texture, import, layer, color, and we're gonna, oh, I think that's right. I don't know why I didn't rename them in the list, but that'll be a future problem. You can tell I didn't script any of this or practice this beforehand. I just wanted to go ahead and do it, and I knew if I took the time to do all that, I would never make this. So thank you for your patience, and I hope it's still educational for you. This PSD has a bunch of layers, so it's taken a second to load. I'm not sure what just happened. It only loaded in the UV. Apparently there is something about Sugarnova's PSD that it's not liking, which I want to find out what it is. So I'm just going to resave the PSD and see if that's what it is. One thing that 3D Coat does not like is when layers actually all have the same name. What it will do if you have multiple layers that have the same name is it will combine them together into one. Okay, I just resaved the PSD and it actually came over this time. I don't know, man. I think it's this color layer is that because these all had the same name in the original PSD, it just clumped them all together. And the other thing that it does not have is clipping to groups. So if you have a layer that is specifically clipped to a group, it cannot do that. There is a benefit to it combining layers with the same number, however, which is that when I now go and import the same PSD for the other side of the head, it will join those layers together. And so I can just paint across both sides and it's no big deal. I don't have to worry about all of these layers being duplicated because it won't be. It can be helpful if you do have complex PSDs to just kind of consolidate them, remove extra layers that you don't necessarily need for this project before you import it into 3D Code. Um, it's just a little happier about that. Sometimes too, it will take these groups when you import them and it will default them to standard blend when in reality they should be set to pass through or, overlay. Sometimes it does fine, sometimes it doesn't. And that just depends on how the layer itself is made. So if you have regular layers inside a group, it should probably be set to overlay. And that's just all stuff you have to learn about your PSD kits. If you make your own, it's much easier. I probably should have just done this with my own kit that I made, but I didn't. So then I'm going to go in here into the painting objects, which will also have the individual mesh objects all listed out by themselves. And we can hide the cheek fluff. And so now we do have, it's not necessarily quite right at the moment because I didn't set it up beforehand, or consolidate it or see what other layers would do, but that's that. So it is in here, and so that is a full PSD though that has been imported, and I did not have to import each layer one at a time while chipping away at my own sanity. Isn't that nice? That's that. I am going to use one of my shader kits just to actually do the texturing preview because I didn't think that through. I'm sorry. And you sat here and you watched me do it. Nope, nope, nope. Oh, actually, yes. Fortunately for you, you don't have to watch me set it all up all over again. All right, so this is the Cerberus Fatalis head, and these are actually hair bases that I painted here inside of 3D Coat. Very creatively named, layer 24 and layer 23. I'm great about that. So I have here my full PSD, all of my shading, just like I ordinarily would do. And I can now, here on the bottom, you can double click on a layer to rename it, or you can right click. Oops, I think. Nope, just right click, double click it to rename it. I've never done it another way, so just thought I'd check for you. But no, you can't right click rename. Double click to rename it here in the text field. To reorder layers, you would just click this little set of 6 dots next to the layer and drag it through the list. You can also click here to get all of the, like a hot menu for all of the layer blending settings. If you want to change those and you don't want to dig through all these menus, you can do that. You can toggle layers on and off over here on the side with the eye, just like you would in, Photoshop or Clip Studio or whatever you're used to using. So let us say I would like to paint something on this model. You have a regular brush tool. You have a pencil, an airbrush. This is like a color operations tool. And this is how you would do like dodge and burn, desaturate, sharpen, and all that is through here. You have a height brush, and all that does is it makes changes to the depth. Like if you're doing normal maps or shine maps, it changed those. You do have an actual smudge tool. We also have the power smooth tool, which is a blessing that I will show you in a moment. There's a clone tool, which yes, you literally can use to sample one section and copy it to another section, just like you would in Photoshop, and it is amazing. You have a transform tool, which you can use to kind of select around an area, and it will let you do your regular transform modifiers, copy and paste. I think that's just like Control V, Control C on your keyboard. You do also have these really cool curves, which were just added to Substance Painter, but hey, guess what? 3D Coat has had them the whole time. And you can use those for painting brush strokes, for adding details, which we'll get into in a second. There is a text tool, which applies text along a curve. And these are, oh, it's still set to when I did my shirts, so you can just they them your forehead. When you do this, it literally stamps the text onto the mesh below where it's defined by the curve. Picture will allow you to import a picture and place it somewhere on the mesh, which will then bake it over the 3D surface. Eraser, we know what that is. Hide allows you to hide a whole material face. Freeze, I believe, just lets you lock a section. Fill, we know what fill does. And the magic wand is your usual kind of color select. Um, so you can select certain areas of the mesh and only paint in those areas. Pick is your color picker. Flatten is it just smooths out your um, normal maps or your depth maps on that section. Measure will allow you to measure distances. Is really handy for, kind of hard surface modeling. And then toposymmetry allows you to use the topology of your model to define the symmetry points rather than relying on the 3D view symmetry, which is just defined by, it's at the center of the world and we will divide it along those 3 axes. So that's pretty cool. So we are currently in symmetry mode because it has that. And I think I have, yeah, there's a button for this. You do have to add this pane. It's not one of the default ones, but you can also access it up here through the symmetry menu. We have symmetry is enabled. You can choose to show the symmetry plane and it will show you where your model is being divided. You have all of your usual symmetry options. If this is in your way or obnoxious, you literally can just turn that off and it is still symmetrical. With our brush tool, we have a stroke steadying option, which is just your usual brush smoothing that you'd have in your art software. Invert tool will actually turn your brush into an eraser or your eraser into a brush. The radius is going to be the size of your brush, which if you are using a tablet, you can set it up so you can control that with the pen, or you can use I think it's control. It doesn't like that I'm using my pen. There's a hotkey to do it with your mouse. I just don't remember what it is. You'll learn those. I just use my tablet pen for everything because I can. Fall off is going to be kind of the softness of the brush. These are going to be your depth and opacity options. You can set the brush depth separately. Smoothing is how much blur is applied if you hold down the shift key, because any brush in 3D Coat is also a blur tool. And so if you hold down shift, it will blur, which is nice. Opacity, glossiness, intensity, and metalness, because you can set those up so you can paint custom normal maps. Over here in the brush options pane, you will see I have a ton of custom brushes, and that is because it actually supports Photoshop ABR brush import. So you can import your favorite brushes from Photoshop or that are Photoshop-like into 3D Coat. They will come over a little funny. You will need to change the brush settings, which is going to be brush options, and you can change all that and just customize your brushes to be how you'd like them to be. The other thing that this software has that's cool, in addition to just your regular brushes, is the strips option. So, why? What did I just do? Okay, so the strips option, so you can actually select strips, and then what will happen is you will paint with these kind of cutouts using the brush that you have selected in the brush tool. So you can paint, they're more like straight line stamps. And you can use those especially in combination with the curves tool and get some really cool effects. Strongly recommend it. The different brushes you use will change the way that your strips look by changing kind of the softness of the edges or the ways that they here. So super neat. As you can see, the brushes are really smooth. That is my favorite thing about it. It just kind of works the way that I want it to. But you will also note there doesn't seem to be any, well, there's a little pressure sensitivity, but it's not necessarily doing all of that that you might want. Can it? It can. Up here you have all of your brush options. You can also access that menu while you're painting by pressing E. And so you can choose between the different ways that pressure sensitivity can impact your tools. So we can set it to impact the opacity. We can set it to impact just the size. We can set it to impact the size and the opacity. Um, and this makes painting just super easy. And then, you paint a line and it's just not quite right, or you want to blend it out a little bit, but not too much, you can use your shift to blur. You can then also go over here to smudge and actually have a full featured, fully powerful smudge tool. So you can move things around, blend things, fix seams. I use this a lot for fixing seams or just kind of refining markings. And I do use it a lot in shading in particular. You just saw that little save flash. 3D Coat by default will auto save your work. It does try to do it when you're not using the tools, but you may notice that it's like been waiting for you, and as soon as you pick up the pen, it'll auto save. It'll also pop up with a timer at the top telling you, hey, I'm about to do it, so you get a warning beforehand. Because it does just for a second while it saves, it'll jerk. So we've got that, and then my favorite tool in all of 3D Coat is this Power Smooth brush. It is incredible because it is very powerful. It is a kind of screen space dependent blur tool, which means that the further away you are, the larger the object is on the screen will actually change how it is blurred. And I use this for all my shading. So you can go in, you can blend, you can blur. It by default will also you can change how much it also smudges while you're shading. So if you want to shape your highlights or your shadows while you're blurring them out, you can do that. If you just want to obliterate everything that you're seeing, you would just kind of pull the camera back a little bit. And then when you blur, it'll do so at a greater strength. Every brush will try to default with this steady stroke on. It just really wants to smooth your strokes. But when you're blurring, that can lag it a bit. So if we turn that off, now it's a lot smoother and it goes faster. And the further away you are, or the smaller it is on the screen, the more it'll get blurred. And it is also impacted by the pressure sensitivity options that you have selected. So you can really get a great deal of fine control over how things are blurred and blended for you. You can also use brushes when blending. Um, I like to use sometimes these kind of like coarse looking brushes. I like the look that it gives, and it can be helpful just to add a little bit of like a natural sort of noisiness so things don't look overly weirdly smooth. Mm-hmm. And now, just kind of give you an idea, like I do this sort of blended out fur edge thing, and I am actually able to do that just the way that I like it. Directly in the software. And for me, it is just as comfortable to do this here as it is to do it in Clip Studio or Photoshop. And if you want a sharper smudge, you just use a harder brush. You can make fluffy things look fluffy. I do also have some fur brushes and I have some fur alphas that I purchased. You can use not just ABR brushes, but alphas, like are sold for, ZBrush or Blender or Substance Painter, and you can import those so that you can paint in them. What's cool if you're using alphas versus regular Photoshop brushes is that they do have heights defined for painting normal maps. So if you want to do that, you can. Oh, it helps if we use the brush with that. So yeah, I think this is actually the brush that I used to do the full fur effect that I have on this head, which is just a subtle kind of. You can, so if you're having a hard time kind of seeing what you're doing because of all the lighting, you can switch over to flat and it removes all the scene lighting for you to make it easier to see what you're doing. It's just like full bright and second life. You can also control the strength of the lighting up here and the contrast, and those tools are all up here. You can change the rotation of the sun, and it is also possible, not through this menu, but through the settings, to change the default environment HDR, which would just be the light, the image map that it uses to generate the lighting in the scene. I found that the default one was a little bit dark, so I did replace it for myself. So yes, I believe I did tell you I would cover some of these other tools. Like clone is really, really cool. You can, define your target with control. So we say that's my target, and then I can paint on another section of the mesh from that target. We can use transform, so I can select an area. It will give me my options, and now I can move that section around and place it on another part of the mesh, and you just press enter to apply it and escape to exit. Oops, there we go. The curves tool you can use to define a line. Over here you can change the width of it. You can also say make it a circle, which means it's going to make a loop, and it will be a closed loop. There you go. Yep. Let's say you make your thing and you say, oh, I don't have enough dots. You can add additional ones in the center and move them just by clicking. Sometimes it does get confused about, are you trying to add another one to the end or? And so you just want to look for, yeah. It'll have this little green circle in the center if it's like an acceptable location to add it. You also can click subdivide and it will add additional ones for you, and all you have to do is click on them to move them. Equalize will space them out evenly, and then let's say, okay, we like how that looks. What to do? You can paint, you can erase, and then these other options, freeze, make planar, and set absolute height, are going to be more for more technical normal maps and opacity map, specular maps and that kind of thing. Oh, close curve, that's when that closes it. So we can now go ahead and say, I want to change how wide it is, and that will change the size of the stroke. And then any brush options that you have selected while you are in this curves tool is actually what it's going to apply. So if I tell it, use this color, this strip, and this brush, then when I click apply, that's what it's going to do. Make sure to turn off strips when you're done with them because I didn't and didn't understand why the text tool wasn't working for like 6 months. That's just me. So if we wanted to apply text, we would just do that, and you literally just click either enter or apply, and it will apply your text. If it doesn't quite do what you wanted, you can click subdivide. Uh, it's being a punk. It doesn't like that I'm trying to put it on a head. Here we go. And then it'll apply it over the curve. Really, really handy. I use this to do all of the text on my Pride shirts that I released. So that's cool. Oh, yeah, here's the autosave timer, letting you know. So there's all of that. Um, yeah, when you use the fill tool, here's something handy to know. It will fill by, you can either use color tolerance, which will have it fill kind of, a section based on how similar it is. You can have it fill a layer. You can fill just a material face, or you can have it fill the entire object. It does also have a gradient mode, which is really cool, where you can select to have a gradient applied rather than a single color. I don't know why. Here we go. It's using the background color for some reason. Oh, because it's set to the gradient. So we can say pick point 1, pick point 2. And now, when we fill, it does our gradient. You can see it's like white here. And it sets that lighter color here in the center and then the darker color because it's set to a radial gradient at the moment. And there are different types, so you can set it to a linear gradient as well. So that's pretty handy. And yes, it will do that seamlessly across the whole mesh, which is just really awesome and very useful. So yeah, I think that's kind of a good lowdown for you on how this works, how to use the software. So now what do? I'm done with it. Or maybe I want to make some more changes, right? You have the option to export the single layer if you're finished, and that would just be up here under textures, export, color albedo map. You can also export a glossiness map, metal map, or normal map if you did make custom normals and things like that. You can also export the entire PSD. And so we say, what UV set? We're going to export the head left. And now what that will do, where did I actually export that to? And now over here, I actually have my Fatalis PSD. And there it is. I can continue to do more work on it here if I would like to, or I can export it out and say that I'm done. You can also, um, there is an app link situation. It just turned on the noise layer without my permission. But there is an app link situation. So if I wanted to, I could export this while I'm working on it over to Clip Studio, make some changes, save the file, and it'll change that here. So you can set up what software you would like to use in the preferences. You would just set Clip Studio or Photoshop or any software that can open PSD files. Um, the one thing that I did notice is that if you are using software that is not Photoshop itself, you will need to save, close the PSD after you're done making your changes before it will allow you to re-export to the software. My understanding is that if you use Photoshop, it just updates the Photoshop file too, but it can't do that for other software. So I can click Sync Layer with External Editor or edit all layers in External Editor. So I can just click on that. We'll say head left, that, and then give my computer a second to catch up. And there it is. That's my file opened up in Affinity Photo for me right here, Layers PSD. I can make changes to it here. Oops. There used to be a bug specifically with Affinity Photo because when you open layers in Affinity Photo, it doesn't name them automatically. It gives them a blank name, and that actually used to crash 3D Coat, but they fixed it. So if you run into that error, just make sure you're using the latest version of both pieces of software. So uh, there's that. So now I can honestly just save it. In Affinity Photo, what you will need to do is tell it to overwrite PSDs. That's like a certain setting in there somewhere. But Clip Studio doesn't have that problem, and Clip will just keep saving in whatever file format you already had. So we've done that. Now we can open that. And there it is. Again, if we do make any further changes, we have to close this. Don't worry about it before it will sync again. So there is that. Really, really handy. I'm a big fan. I've been using this software to make all of my mods and clothing textures for about a year and a half now. And every day I just learn something else about it that makes me like it more. I originally chose 3D Coat over Substance Painter just because I didn't want to have to worry about setting up UDIM tiles so I could paint across UV borders. And I guess kind of accidentally bought the right thing for me. So maybe it's the right thing for you, maybe it isn't, but at least now you know how it works, what it does, where to get it, and how much it costs. So thank you so much for watching, putting up with my ADHD nonsense, and I hope to do more videos for you in the future, perhaps, if you want them, and I hope you have a lovely day.